I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where we read between the lines of celebrity memoirs. And if you say, I don't want to read between the lines, I just want the straightforward text of the memoir, then you can have that, but not here. So leave. No. Then you say, get out.
Get out.
Right now.
It's the end of You and Me.
Okay, now go ahead.
That was your best one ever, Ashley.
Thank you.
That was so relevant to the purpose of why we even do these. And then also you cinched it with a memoirist relevant punchline.
Thank you.
That was useful and engaging. I'm so excited to be your co-host. I have a renewed respect and love for you.
Nude respect.
Renewed. Because it was dead.
Oh.
Ashley, do you have any news?
Oh my God, big news. Upon listening to this episode, we're going to be sky high on an airplane on our way to Australia.
Yeah, so if you have not gotten Australia tickets, it is truly your last episode ever to do so. Please buy. I don't know if they're sold out yet, but check anyway. Check the Geneva if they are and you're looking for someone's tickets who got too early and found that they can't go. But there's definitely tickets on sale for Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Brisbane. We cannot wait to meet our Aussie mates.
Oh my God, you guys, I am so excited. We still have a couple weeks at time of recording, but boy, oh boy, I'm bubbling through the roof. Claire, if you were writing a memoir about your life, what would you title last week's chapter?
Can I be manifesty on here for a minute?
Of course. Manifest next week's chapter instead.
Literally, okay. I'm going to check back in next week and tell you how it goes. My dream is tonight, me and Mac have been planning for about 8 to 6 months now, a sock purge where we want to go through all the socks in our house and anybody that has no friend, they get killed. Much like that film, The Lobster.
Oh.
But kind of like a crossover episode.
Oh my God, it could be just like The Lobster where every sock that doesn't have a mate turns into an animal and you can make little puppets and keep them around your house.
Exactly.
How is that for decluttering? Turning your socks into little toys.
Exactly. So we have been working on this, dreaming about it, scheming it up for, I want to say almost a year maybe. And today I think is the day we spent all weekend doing laundry. Every single sock is clean. Sayonara, amigos, because if you don't match up, bitches, the lonely will perish. And I cannot wait. And I'm already nervous that we're not going to get around to it. I'm already nervous that this episode recording is going to go long and I'm going to get home and be tired and want to eat dinner and watch Emily in Paris.
Oh, God, I love Emily in Paris.
I hope to God that next time you guys hear from me, I'm down some socks. And I know that may sound funny to you guys because you may be saying, Claire, isn't your whole problem in life that you don't have enough socks? And I'd say part of the problem is I don't have intentional socks. And also the problem was hugely rectified last Christmas when everybody in my life kind of interventioned me via gift. And like everybody I know gave me about 5 pairs of socks. So I'm up. We up.
Too many socks.
Now the old guy's got to die.
That's nice.
Ashley.
Yes, Claire?
If you were a celebrity, what would have made your memoir chapter this week?
I think it would be titled A Spark Reignites. I used to do stand-up comedy, as some may know, and it was a great passion of my life, and it's how I met you, and it's how I have all of the things in my life that I like quite a bit. But I feel like in the last couple of years, my excitement about it has dwindled a bit, and then I got downright peeved at like the entire culture of the New York stand-up comedy scene, and I was just like not interested, and I didn't like doing stand-up. I didn't like thinking about stand-up. I was just kind of over it entirely. And then I was like forcing myself, and then I said, you know what? Just don't until you ever maybe want to again. And this last week, I finally had a spark where I was like, oh, I think I like it again. And I feel excited about getting on stage, and I feel excited about writing new jokes. And I haven't really gotten on stage, and I haven't really written new jokes. But I feel like I want to for the first time in a very long time. And that feels like kind of exciting.
Oh my God, a new love in your life.
Yeah.
And it's the love you knew before.
The TikTok tarot reading where they said he will come back if you claim.
Mm-hmm.
I commented, claim he comes back. And boy, oh boy, did stand up come rushing back in.
Thank God it was stand up. I'm trying to think who in your life I'd love for you to meet again from a romantic perspective.
That's why I don't like TikTok tarot readers, because they're always like,
they're too powerful.
He's changed his mind about you. And I'm like, for the love of God, tell him not to. For the love of God.
Tell him to stay put.
I said
lock him up in the stars.
Should we get into this week's book? It's one that we have been anticipating for, dare I say, 25 years.
I don't know if you guys recall, but
Joanna Levesque,
Boston's own, Massachusetts' own hitmaker. She was the youngest person ever to have a number one hit, Leave, Get Out, followed up by one of my favorite all-time songs, Baby It's You, followed up by Too Little Too Late, another incredible hit. I have to tell you guys, there is a moment at the very beginning of Baby It's You with Bow Wow, formerly Lil, currently not.
He's not so little anymore.
Currently Big Bow Wow, big is silent, where they're at the carnival. And she says, why is everybody trying to be living like a celebrity doing what they see on MTV? And she makes a little TV signal with her hands.
And you've thought about it every day since.
You know how when you're young and you just latch on to certain things where you're like, that's what being a self-possessed human being is. It's like the way she did that with her hands was so important to me when I was little.
I feel like there is not necessarily an understanding from the younger generation how impactful JoJo's existence was on music for a long period of time.
Well, I just think for somebody our age, she was only a year or two older than us. And imagine if Hannah Montana had been like loved by adults, was on Z100.
And then disappeared for 10 years.
I was so competitive with her. And I have to say, even though she had her ups and downs, she still won by a mile. Because I have yet to even
her music videos were so visible. Like I can still picture her sitting in the hallway, like against the lockers.
The way that she like pushes the camera away as if you're embodying the cheating boyfriend.
I'm so sorry I did that to you.
Ugh, JoJo.
Anyway, so she's finally written a book. If you didn't know who she was already, we just told you she was a pop star, is a pop star, and she disappeared for a long period of time. And if you were aware of her then, there have been questions looming, swirling.
Like, what happened?
Like, what happened? And boy, oh boy, is she going to tell us. JoJo put out a book called Over the Influence. It is released today, September 17th, 2024.
She was born December 20th, 1990.
Yeah. So she's like 6 months older than me.
And yet she's accomplished so much more.
That's so embarrassing for me.
Yeah, I still have a good 2 years to catch up. I could win a Grammy and top the charts in 2 years, I'm sure of it. If I just put my mind to it.
Yeah, I think it's pos. When's the Grammy cutoff?
I think I've lost this year, but next year.
Yeah.
2026. That's my year. So I was very excited because this book opens with my favorite multiple lead-ins. Nothing prepares you for a book like a warm-up chapter or two.
You've got an author's note. You've got an intro. You've got a chapter 1.
Good, because sometimes I like to waddle my way in, go up to the waist first. I'm not a dive.
Acclimatize.
And she says everything me and Ashley kind of look for in a memoir. Nothing really prepares you for what it feels to exercise your demons out of your body and look at them in black and white. The process has been a lot about humility and accountability as much as anything, which is promising.
So the intro opens with her experience as a little kid sitting on the sidelines of AA meetings. Her parents met in Alcoholics Anonymous. And this chapter is an important prelude into the relationship we're about to see unfold between her parents. She has been around addiction her whole life.
She really relates to Dr. Gabor Mate, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, who has a TED Talk where he describes addiction as the hungry ghosts. The hungry ghosts are creatures with large empty bellies and small scrawny necks and tiny little mouths, so they can never get enough. They can never fill the emptiness inside. And we are all hungry ghosts in the society. We all have this emptiness. And so many of us are trying to fill that emptiness from the outside. And the addiction is all about trying to fill that emptiness from the outside. She says you can be addicted to a lot of things, drugs, alcohol, but also consumerism, sex, food, the list goes on.
And she herself found her first sort of addiction in attention and having people's approval.
So she gives you the background on her parents. They met in AA. Her mom, she gives credit to, not credit, but she goes, my mom had a hard life. When she was 3, her entire family was in a car crash and she lost her mom, baby sister, and older brother right before her eyes. Her dad and brother and other sisters survived, but obviously the family was left incredibly scarred. Her dad never talked about the trauma. She quickly found herself using drugs and alcohol to escape the pain. And by the time she was in her mid-20s, she was back in AA, not for the first time and not for the last time.
So she met the dad who had also been in and out of sobriety. Alcohol wasn't his number one vice. He was more of a drug user, but he preferred AA to NA, so he found himself in those meetings when he needed a 12-step program.
She says he preferred AA to NA because he was like, well, I'm not like those guys. They're messes. And I'm like, I do think actually right there is the red flag about why he was never able to find sobriety. I think that kind of like, well, I'm better than those fuckers is...
It's very interesting.
Not the humility it takes to really heal yourself.
Especially when she opens talking about how often and how accustomed she was to hearing the Serenity Prayer. And then for the dad to be like so unsurrendered to his addiction.
Despite their differences, they had a lot in common. Both were gifted singers who even made some money performing. But they had other jobs to support themselves. So the dad was a bit older than the mother, about 10 years, I'd say. And I think one of the big rules in AA is you're not supposed to date anybody really for a year. And you're definitely not supposed to date, if you're a mentor, which I believe he was. I think he was a mentor in AA. You're definitely not supposed to date somebody just a few months in. But right out the gate, they start dating. It's very chaotic.
She ended up having her first sober sex with him 10 months later and got pregnant with me the first time they hooked up.
It got real really fast.
He was not sure that they should keep Joanna. Dad thought it was too early in their relationship and recovery for a child, but she was like, no, having a kid will give me purpose. Mom's commitment to sobriety only intensified after I was born on December 20th, 1990.
So when they were good, they were good. But as you can guess, when they were bad, it was horrible. On bad nights, Mom's depression and distrust seeped into every inch of their small space, and Dad's pent-up rage would eventually burst through, especially whenever she accused him of falling off the wagon. And he was struggled with drugs and alcohol for his entire life. So she grows up in AA. Her mom was very committed to going to meetings, and Joanna would just sit in the back and overhear these stories and be very like, whatever happens, I don't want to end up here. It was a lot for a kid to take on.
One of the things I inherited from my parents was a passion for music. So she also, from day one, had some absolute fucking pipes on her.
Mom said it scared the shit out of her how naturally singing came to her little girl and how self-possessed I was. And she loves music, and she loves all kinds of music, and she loves singing, and her parents are always singing with her. They're always harmonizing. Like, that's the one thing that all three of them share and love and enjoy.
Her parents were always saying, like, we're fine, everything's good. And she had this very strong understanding that things were not fine and good. And then by the time she was 5, her mom and dad split for good. JoJo and her mom moved back in with JoJo's grandpa, so the mom's dad, and then his wife.
And this is very hard because they don't get along a lot.
He's also an alcoholic.
Joanna's mother has this feeling like after the terrible car accident, her father went on to just marry a new woman and have a new family and ignore everything. And she had always felt like the leftover child. Joanna does have a great aunt and uncle, and she has a lot of local relatives. I mean, it's a lot of people who grew up in this town, stayed in this town. So she knows most of the adults in her life, and she is pretty much the only kid.
She also does not really get along with other kids. She just has this distinct feeling of otherness her entire life. She feels like she's too much. She's very into performing. And I think because at home there was always turmoil. And so then she would always take like the attention in order to distract from that turmoil and perform or do something to kind of change the energy in the house. In school and in other situations, this was actually not a welcome behavior. Kids don't like that.
She also felt very othered, I think, because she was so used to hanging out with adults. She didn't know how to relate to kids. She dressed like her mom. She loved to be eccentric. She felt she never fit in. She felt very aware, too, that they didn't have as much money as some of her classmates. She just always felt like they didn't like her. And then she distanced herself, and then they started to not like her. It was a real like cycle of
left outness.
Yeah. But the thing she's most passionate about is performing. And she's always saying to her mom, like, I have to get out of here. We have to get to Hollywood. I want to make it. And she is like, you know, the kid at the nail salon performing for all the adults. She's performing for the teachers. Anywhere she can go, she's singing.
It is tough. She never really fit in at school. And then the people who worked the lunchroom, the adults, would like let her do a performance in the lunchroom. And I am like, well, certainly this didn't help with the likability.
But she is performing. When she's 6 years old, she auditions for the local production of the Who's Tommy the Musical, which she gets. She goes and sings On My Own. And she goes, I knew I nailed it. She was like deeply possessed. And she said even from the time she was like 3, 4, 5, she wanted to go to an audition. She wanted to nail it. She wanted to like light up. What did they want? She'll do another song. She went and did 3 different songs. She just kept going for them and saying, press the air like it's a radio button and I'll do a new song. I'll change the channel. She like was so obsessed and able to impress adults from a young age. Her mom was always taking her to like live music.
Yeah. So at one point she ends up singing for this guy, Big Daddy. And he was like, that was incredible. And she was like, great. Can I sing with you whenever I can come to a show? And he was like, sure.
And even when they did local broadcast TV, they let her come sing. I mean, her mom was always taking her to performances, always taking her to different musical experiences, and also performing herself. Her mom was in multiple bands. Of course, they didn't make as much money as JoJo would go on to make, but it was a hobby and it was a passion that she always pursued. So JoJo was always in these experiences.
Meanwhile, the kids at school have an I Hate Joanna club. I was so confused about what exactly I had done to warrant that. This is really hard because kids suck. Especially in this day and age, especially a kid who sticks out in any way, shape, or form. It's really hard because I feel like most kids don't like school and a lot of kids don't fit in, but that doesn't mean you have to like go to Hollywood at 10.
Yeah. She also, beyond just not liking school, is so explicit about how she wants to be working like grown-ups. I think we see a little bit of the Jessica Simpson effect here, where when you see how much money stresses out your parents, even from a young age, you want to be able to contribute. You want to be able to alleviate those problems. You're like, well, maybe I can take the problems on.
Yeah.
So she doesn't just want to leave school. She wants to like be a working adult.
As long as I could remember, adults told me that I was an artist and I felt like they could see into my soul. Performing and writing came so easily to me all at once.
So then she's on Kids Say the Darndest Things. She sees an ad for the audition in the mall. Her parents take her and she lays it on. She gets them on the stage and she's so astute. She's the last one to go, and Bill comes and asks her about
Bill Cosby.
Yeah, sorry. The horrible Bill Cosby comes up and asks her.
Jail's famous Bill Cosby.
Jail's own. Asks her a question about her parents sleeping in the same bed. And of course, she knows her parents are divorced. They're not even in the same house. But she's able to pick up on what it is that they want her to say and what will get a laugh. And she lays it on thick and she crushes it. And everybody's like, she did so great. I don't know. She just was like, give me an opportunity. I'm going to fucking nail it. I'm going to knock it out of the park.
I mean, she knew at age fucking 13 to make that TV shape with her hands in a music video.
Yeah. She's a performer. Whenever I saw Mr. Cosby, the audience reacting favorably to a certain aspect I showed, I did even more of it. More growling, more volume, more sass.
Suddenly, I was backstage in the middle of a hug sandwich with my parents, and everyone was smiling and congratulating me. I didn't want to ask too much of God, knowing he had the literal world on his plate, but there was still a part of me that hoped if I was special enough and did a good enough job, it would bring my parents back together.
She is obsessed. She's like pushing her mom from every angle to get her auditions, to put her out there. This is the era of daytime TV, like Ricki Lake, Oprah, and they are all hosting these like most talented kid contests. So she gets herself on VHS and like really has her mom pitch these VHSs to people.
She gets on the Rosie O'Donnell show. She gets on Maury. Even Oprah plays one of the tapes. She doesn't go on the show, but they air her singing. And then she also gets asked to come do another episode of Kids Say the Darndest Things in LA.
Yeah, they bring her back out for a second appearance. For a while, they move in with her mom's newest beau, who she married. The newest one was 15 years older than her, and they got married less than a year after meeting, which came as a real shock to our family, mostly because of how outspoken she was about how she didn't actually like him, and that she was only with him because she didn't want to lose his friendship or be alone. Even though Joanna absolutely hated this guy, she's like, I had to admit, it was the biggest house we ever lived in, and it was nice to have stability for a while, but of course, after 2 years, they leave and end up living together in basements and stuff. She says her mom was living off of $10,000 a year at the time.
Yeah.
As a house cleaner and a babysitter, and really scraping by to make ends meet.
I wanted to help take care of us. I had this deep sense that things might be better for us if I made them better. I guess this is the problem is like, of course, she is the kid pushing for this attention, but it's not out of nowhere. It's because she sees the instability. It's because she like wants to help. It's because she wants to change things.
I couldn't quiet the nagging feeling in my gut that a massive change in our lives was just around the corner if only I could be discovered by the right person who would make me a star. She believed it too. And this really does start this tension of how headstrong and ambitious and determined JoJo was as this little girl, and how much she's like, you know, I nagged every day. I begged my mom. I pushed her. I wore her down. And then turning around and going, but should a child have been able to wear down a mother?
Yeah.
Like, sure, I wore her down and I get that that was my fault, but like, can we hold an 8-year-old accountable for what an 8-year-old does?
So then she goes to a Britney Spears concert and someone there recognizes her from her TV appearances and is like, oh my God, you should come backstage and meet Britney.
I don't know how it fucking used to work back then. I tell ya.
It's also like, did this person work there or something?
Literally, someone just said, you should meet Britney.
She might have just been a random person from the crowd because she has to have JoJo like sing for the bouncers at every level of getting backstage, which like, why did the bouncers give a fuck about someone in the audience who could sing good?
I mean, it feels like a video game. Like you have to know the password.
Yeah. And then she gets backstage and she sings for Britney and Britney's like, really good job.
Months later, just before my 9th birthday, we received a contract from the offices of Britney's attorney outlining a deal that would make me her first signing. I was eager to get going, but my mom took time to process it and think about what it would really mean to let her child, who was only 9 years old, start making an album. She respectfully declined, and I was convinced that she was ruining my life. And she's like, what if this is my only shot? And she keeps going, it's not, Joanna. What's meant to be will be. You're just too young right now. You have to wait till you're 18. And of course, Joanna is like,
this is the worst thing that's ever happened to her.
Which I believe at 8 it is.
If at 8 years old, I got a recording contract from Britney Spears and my mom said no, I think I'd have a hard time with it.
Sure. But I'd look back and go, how right you were. I am sad because I think I see at the beginning what we always wish parents would do of child stars, which is say, I actually believe in you so much, I don't think this will be your only chance.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, well, we'll let God do what he does. You have to say, if this is how talented you are at 9, think about how talented you'll be at 17. Think about how talented you'll be at 24 if you just keep practicing and working on it. Ultimately, she wears her down. So they go back
to LA.
And then they decide that they should come back out for pilot season, since the next logical step in my career was for me to act on a scripted show like Amanda Bynes or Hilary Duff. Something I'm very interested in is that she was too young per her mom's consideration to have a record album, but not too young to go be on TV. And I want to start positing a seedling.
Sure.
I loved this book. It was really compelling and interesting. And I think she's very honest. I didn't feel that there was a ton of analysis or distance or understanding in this book. She doesn't give you any assumptions, which I guess for better or for worse. You know what I mean? Because you know about assumptions.
Yeah, they make a butt out of
everybody. I wonder if part of the hesitation of her mom letting Joanna do specifically a record label was her own jealousy.
Yeah.
I just have to wonder why not music, but yes to pilot season.
No, that's a really good question because, yeah, she is correct in saying JoJo is too young to sign a record deal. She's also then incorrect in saying, but she is old enough to go audition for TV shows. And the other thing, going back to what you were saying about where this book lands, I found it to be a very effective part 1.
Yes. And I have to say, it was one of those books where I was getting to the end of it and I was like, wait a minute, we need 6 more years between what happened on this page and what happens at the end of the book. Please don't tell me this was last week. And it was last week. And I was like, okay, we're going to need some more distance, Joanna.
And I think we will get more distance. I know we always rag on people who put out books too soon before there's distance and things like that. I guess what I think is she should have ended this book with, sorry to jump ahead, the end of her engagement in 2021, ended the book and said, still working on stuff, epilogue.
Because there are
part
successful
2 coming at age 40.
Jeanette McCurdy, for example, has a very successful young book.
And this book very much does ramp up to get back into the chapter we're in now, which is her releasing more music. And I do believe someone that has so much fame and was so important at a certain point in time, for you to open the book and then close that chapter before relaunching a new project, that is not something I think is stupid.
I agree. And also at this point, she has 20 years of distance from when she was a hitmaker. So there is distance, but it's hard to talk about last week.
It also very much feels not like the bow on top of her career. There's so much more left in there, but this needed wrapping up.
She also begins the tension between her and her mom. I never doubted that mom thought I had talent, but now she had started to tell me on at least a bi-weekly basis that I was getting too big for my britches, that I was getting too excited about myself and I shouldn't forget where I came from, that she would always be the pin to pop my inflating ego. She obviously wanted me to stay humble and not turn into a conceited, prepubescent monster, but it's every time we rolled out of Foxborough, it became all the more obvious that I would never fit in or be happy there.
This is something that is tough because, of course, every kid wants to leave their town if you don't fit in. Unless you're popular in middle school, you're well, when does the next chapter start? This is tough because I'm just but the answer isn't move to LA. But then she, at 10, is able to record a demo and convince her mom to move to LA.
Throughout this story, she's also giving little excerpts of what it was like to be her father's daughter. She was seeing her father maybe every other week on the weekends, and he was really struggling with drugs. He had very clearly fallen off the wagon. And there was rumors in her family that he was specifically injuring himself so that he could get on disability and then also go get pills. He was falling asleep at the wheel. They often were in very scary car situations. And she says when he was good, he was a Jack Black type, just so funny, so charming, singing. charismatic. Everybody loved him. He lit up a room. But when he was in a bad place, he was
falling asleep at the wheel and she was in the car.
And also screaming at her, being explosive in a way she couldn't predict, which really puts kids on edge and like teaches them, I think, how to perform, how to like predict what everybody else wants and become the example that everyone's looking to see.
So she convinces her mom to move her out to LA. As a grown-up now, this bothers me. I don't want to invalidate her feelings, her mom's feelings, because her mom says JoJo was just so persistent she had no other choice. But I also don't think it's fair to put that much responsibility or power into the hands of an 11-year-old. And that's kind of the only sentence I think we get where she's like, was that the right call?
I think she has a couple more of these, actually.
Okay.
Like of those exact, like, I was very intense, but shouldn't mom have been stronger?
Yeah.
So they move out, they live with a distant cousin who lives in La Habra, California, about 45 minutes from LA. She gets enrolled in the local high school there, or the local school there. She has a hard time, again, with fitting in. It seems like they're just as mean as the last school. I was willing to do anything short of changing who I was, if that makes sense.
So she also immediately books a job on Ned's declassified school survival guide.
Yeah, she's not going to be one of the main kids. She's going to be like a dork who takes her glasses off and turns out to be hot. And she takes this as like an attack on herself. She starts to become very insecure about how she looks. She's worried she's not one of the pretty girls. And booking this role, she really internalizes, well, I guess I am the nerd. I guess I wasn't pretty enough or cool enough to be the best friend.
And this is another interesting little part. I loved being on set. I loved working alongside adults. There were a number of kids on set. It was a Nickelodeon show after all. And maybe something was protecting me. Maybe I dodged a bullet. I've seen the doc. I've listened to the podcast. And oh my God. Yeah, I've seen the doc. I've listened to the podcast. You know, being a Nickelodeon kid was dangerous. But reading the rest of this book, what bullet
did you dodge?
The
pedophilia bullet.
Yeah, not in the same exact way.
But
I mean, she was a 13-year-old pop star.
So then she goes on America's Most Talented Kids with Mario Lopez, and she gets to the end and she loses. She's hysterical. She can't get it together. But someone named James Womack comes up to her and says, this is a blessing in disguise. She has real talent, real soul, and he is going to turn her into what she is meant to be, a superstar.
So he is going to introduce her to Bobby Womack and get her introduced to record labels and the people who can make her life something.
She says, now that we were on the other side of the country, the entertainment capital of the world, Mom and I only had each other. We were partners. That's fully how I felt. Up till then, it had just been us against the world. But now we had somebody, James, who was going to be like our friend.
So James and her mom become her co-managers because she does not want her mom pushed out of the equation. And James gets them a lot of meetings up top. They meet with the Maloofs.
Formerly of billionaire fame, now of formerly housewives fame. The first time I met record producer Vincent Herbert was at a random office space that acted as a makeshift studio.
So he becomes her producer and like adult best friend for years and years. They had just an incredible creative synergy. The
first day in under an hour, we wrote a song called Yes and No. Vince had come up under Rodney Darkchild Jerkins' tutelage through the New Jersey music scene and had experienced some successful few years prior with Destiny's Child working on their first single, No, 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 Part 1. He had to contribute to an Aaliyah song, and this was like the late 90s, early 2000s, so that was the most important thing you could do. And he's the one who finally calls her JoJo.
And she is concerned because she does not want it to be like Casey and JoJo. She thinks that'll be confusing. And he's like, no, trust me, people will know.
So then Vincent introduces her to Barry Hankerson,
Aaliyah's uncle,
who had the record label Blackground Records. He was a Black Panther and Gladys Knight's husband and manager, and he'd also managed R. Kelly and been involved in a number of various business ventures. He made something from nothing. Vince gave us a bit of his backstory, and we were both so impressed.
So she goes to sing for him. He doesn't speak for a while, so she thinks she bombed. And then he says softly, with some wetness in his eyes, I saw baby girl over your shoulder saying, Uncle Barry, she's the one. Whoa.
That was Aaliyah. So they're immediately like, well, this is our guy, right? First things first, James was out and Mom was in. Barry told us he would set us up with our own place to live and I could get started working on an album ASAP. What the fuck? This man was so generous and confident and cool, and he really believed in me. So I guess all the other executives they had met with James were kind of like, you're really great. Come back when you're, pubescent, when you're menstruating. And he was like, no. It starts today.
Even as a preteen, I felt a strong sense of urgency, like my career, my life depended on this forward motion.
And Vincent and Barry had officially joined forces and the full court press was on. They were going to build their entire career around her. I think they were in kind of like a weird place and they were like, this is it. They kept calling her their great white hope. They have like a car pick them up all the time. Like they're really like whining and dining.
Before I knew it, I was signing on the dotted line, my 12-year-old trying to be perfect cursive. Joanna Noelle Levesque, aka JoJo.
But looking back, my mom wishes that she'd stopped long enough to ask someone just to slow down and explain things to her. But she was so afraid of looking stupid or feeling embarrassed. I really get that. We were out in a world that was completely foreign to us, essentially feeding ourselves to the wolves we'd been warned about.
It's so hard because I understand for a family that doesn't have experience, this is like a pre-social media world. This is a family that is having a lot of financial strain. Like this is so hopeful and exciting, but like a label that wants to push a 13-year-old pop star.
Yeah.
Instead of like building and developing a pop star, even as like a second option.
So they moved the family out to Edgewater, New Jersey. Shout out Hudson County.
Totally.
That's right by where I'm from. Barry is Muslim. They always have the Fruit of Islam, which is the security wing of the Nation of Islam, present in the studios. The Nation was a big part of Barry's life. He's friends with like Louis Farrakhan. She's just like part of this very Black world. It's a Black operated record company, Black owned. This was like a very important part of her life. They had like a lot of R&B hits. Like she was getting a crash course in Black culture. And there was like a lot of awareness that she was like white. But they kept being like, but you don't have a white voice.
Mm-hmm.
And they really did keep calling her the Great White Hope.
So she also got media training really early on, which I find very interesting because I feel like a lot of other memoirs we've read don't have that. A lot of people I feel like don't get media training until they've fucked up media forward.
Yeah. Like, for example, they taught her that even though she had been reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and getting even deeper into her favorite album, Voodoo by D'Angelo, the teen magazines wouldn't get it, nor would they print it. Imagine Hillary Duff doing press for Lizzie McGuire being like, right now I'm reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. It's a teen beat.
Tiger beat.
Oh, yeah. So she also is like stressed because they're writing lyrics for her. And she's like, does this sound authentic to me?
So Barry brings her a demo for the song Leave parentheses, Get Out, close parentheses. She does not like it. Mom does not like it. Nobody really gets it, but Barry's like, you must record this song.
And she's so confused because it's like so obviously like algorithmically created. It was created by a Swedish duo. And you know, all the great pop music comes from Sweden. And she goes, how are we going to fit this on an album that's R&B and hip hop?
And they were like, oh, you're not going to make an album that's really very R&B and hip hop.
And she's like, then why do you keep teaching me about it?
So she records this song. She thinks it's a little bit goofy, but she goes with it.
And it's the first time she's had like a professional experience where they, what's it called? Where they rip it all up and do teeny beanie bits.
Yeah, she's used to just like belting out and trying to have a great take. And then they were like, no, we're going to record it 300 times.
And take each syllable that we like.
Yeah. She starts doing some photo shoots and things like that. She's getting extremely self-conscious, especially compared to other pop stars at the time. She's young. She has not gone through puberty yet. She's just like very, very afraid of not giving what people want her to give. At one point, she's doing a photo shoot where they have her hold a Shar-Pei. And she's like, did they make me do that because they think I look like a Shar-Pei?
She's very insecure. She's like scrutinizing her body through the adult celebrity gaze and lens. And of course, she's young, she's impressionable, and her body is changing. And that's really not a way that you should be looking at yourself. They also cut Never Say Goodbye, which is a gorgeous, heartfelt ballad. There's one thing I can tell you about reading memoirs. It's the gorgeous, heartfelt ballad never makes it too far. They're always like, but the song that meant so much because it was about my grandpapa. Why can't that be the single? The one that shows all my riffs.
I will be honest, one of my pet peeves, and I really liked this book. I thought she did an incredible job, and I felt like I got all the answers I was looking for. One of my big pet peeves is song lyrics to like illustrate your point in the book.
Especially, no offense to her, but these are not good lyrics. I'm sorry, she's not like a poet.
It's just
the lyrics never get much deeper than Leave Get Out.
She'll be like, I was going through a really hard breakup. That's how I wrote this song. The lyrics were, the breakup was really hard. I was so sad. On the floor, I thought of you, texting you. Was it your number popping up on my phone? No, it was someone else.
But what I was getting to is they do that and they record a more up-tempo Caribbean music-inspired track called Baby It's You. And she's like, maybe Bow Wow could be on it because that's who she had a crush on. And she's so cute. She had this friend Nini from home and they had an agreement that even though they both had a crush on him, if JoJo had an opportunity, she could make a pass. That's girlhood.
So Ned's Declassified is about to start shooting and Barry goes in for a meeting with Nickelodeon and he's like, you're using her for clout. and this is not a good deal. So he makes her quit.
After the meeting, we stood outside while Barry convinced us that being part of that show for what they were offering me and what the time commitment would actually be, well, it just wouldn't make sense. I trusted that Barry knew what he was talking about, that this wasn't right for me and he wasn't about to let some big corporation get one over on us, so we walked away. Can I say?
That's probably the right call.
Now that we know through Josh Duhamel, is that whose memoir we read?
Nope.
Okay. You know, the boy from the Brothers show with Miranda Sings.
No.
Those kids are getting like $75K a year for those shows, no residuals. It's just like not a lifetime amount of money to live off of. When you think about the fact that they were working full time, supporting a whole network, supporting their whole family.
And she was not even going to be a main character. So I bet you she was making like $50 an episode.
Yeah, it's just not worth it.
So he makes her walk, which normally I'd be like, what the fuck? But I think that was actually the right call.
So then she gets home one day from school, drops her backpack on the floor, and my mom told me that the label wanted to go with Leave Get Out as my first single. I'd completely forgotten about the song. The choice felt so out of left field. I'd gotten comfortable inhabiting this world of R&B, and to me, this song was some Disney Channel shit. I was confused as to what they were trying to do there. So like they cry about it, but then she's like, we have to do whatever they say.
And then the song is a smash success. She starts getting on TRL constantly. She gets a stylist, or her friend is styling her. Teen People invites her to do an editorial with Sierra.
She does a music video where she like realizes for the first time what it is to be the star. She's like, everything I wanted, they would just do for me. The most bizarre thing about being the star on this set was people wouldn't stop asking me what I wanted. Are you okay? Do you need a water, a straw, a snack? Do you want this chair to sit down on? This was the flip side of pop star discomfort, never having to do the little things yourself.
Even though I wanted other people on set to like me, I also really wanted to make sure mom was okay and still loved me and thought everything was going well. She seemed upset a lot in those days. I felt a growing confusion and tension radiating off of her, and she could shift from warm and present to closed off in a matter of seconds. So this starts to ignite a much more intense rift between her and her mom. Again, this is why you should not let your kid be a child star under any circumstances, because I feel like as a young mom, how much of her was like, what have I done? And then at this point, there's a snowball raging down a hill.
I also do think she is kind of an unwell person. She's clearly very unhealthy. We'll see later that her behavior gets really like frantic and chaotic and unstable.
Mm-hmm.
And I also do think she's watching her 13-year-old daughter live her dream.
Yeah.
I want to say all of it comes from this place of like protection misguided, but I think a lot of it probably also comes from jealousy.
Yeah.
She talks about suddenly becoming very famous and how she still felt like everybody who was even her fans that were older and prettier, more stylish. Sometimes I couldn't believe how embracing they were of me. They thought I was cool. I still felt like the other, but at least this version of me was kind of famous. She goes so high this first high. So few people in the world have ever had a number one hit. To have a number one hit your first time out the gate as a 13-year-old.
You and I talk about this a lot, but I think people really overestimate how many number one hits even your faves have had. I don't think Ariana Grande had one until like 7 Rings or something like that.
No, Thank You Next was her first number one hit.
Thank You Next.
And then even I remember one time looking up like Taylor Swift hasn't had as many as you would think.
Mm-hmm. In the late spring of 2004, an opportunity came for me to open for the one and only Usher. So she's going to do the European leg of his Confessions tour, which, holy shit.
That is so cool. I'm such an Usher fan. The last Super Bowl, I couldn't believe how good it was.
Oh, he's amazing.
I'm sorry. I'm an Usher fan through and through.
This tour overlaps with the end of her school year, so she ends up having to drop out of school and do homeschooling.
And her mom is pissed. Her mom keeps being like, well, maybe she can't do the Usher tour.
Do you know something so weird is she barely even met Usher. She was opening for him for like 2 months or something like that. And she ended up getting the team that was working with her to get her into one of Usher's meet and greets. But she and Usher did not cross paths.
But it was very educational for her because she said to watch such a superstar like that. She's like, he knew the songs inside and out. He was hitting every beat. I mean, I will say Usher is an incredible performer. And she felt very connected to him because he had been discovered so young.
When I met him, he was incandescent, a superstar in all his glory.
She also has an experience on this tour of going to France and getting booed and having people throw shit at her. That's a really mean thing to do to a 13-year-old.
That's
Don't
crazy.
Boo her. But I guess the concert was running way late and then they put her out there and I guess these people were just like drunk and pissed and had been waiting for Usher and they were like, well, who's this? You still shouldn't throw something at a child.
Or anyone.
I was going to say, you could throw stuff at adults.
Oh.
But I guess, that's why this podcast is great. We disagree.
Okay, yeah.
We respectfully disagree.
I would say not me. I think if you're going to come to one of our shows and you want to throw something, I decline consent.
I understand that sometimes you just gotta shut me up.
So I suppose if you're going to chuck stuff at one of our shows, make sure you have aim to hit the right person. Mom was deeply afraid that this was all going to be too much too soon for me. I mean, it was.
So they're on this European tour and they start hearing some sketchy rumors about their friend Barry, who it turns out has some suspicious dealings in the world. Mom was confidentially advised that we get as far away from the company as we could and as soon as possible, warned that we were on a sinking ship.
So the problem is she's signed a 7-album deal with him. So getting as far away as soon as possible is not as easy as it sounds. So she ends up with a #1 hit. At 13, I was the youngest solo artist ever to have a #1 on the chart.
In late June 2004, the JoJo album debuted at #4 on the Hot 100 chart. Universal had low expectations. And she's like, I feel like we could have gone #1, but they just hadn't literally ordered enough units, which is such a funny fragment of the past.
It is a thing that I feel like used to happen kind of a lot. I was listening to an episode of a podcast that was about like the history of this band called Big Star, where they constantly would just like not have enough albums that got to the stores. And so then they never really charted in any notable way, but they would always get these like rave reviews in the magazines. So people would read the magazine and be like, what's this album? And then they would go to the store to try to get it and no one could ever find it.
That's really funny. That's a funny thing to do to yourself multiple times in a row.
Literally.
So then she signs with ICM, RIP to ICM that doesn't exist anymore. She gets an across-the-board agent named Brian, and she starts to do films. In the span of 7 months, they filmed 2 movies, one after the next. First was Aquamarine in Australia. She's just like us, in case you skipped the beginning. We are in Australia right this fucking minute.
We just landed.
In Perth, we are in Brisbane, we are in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. If you are just now finding out, which is possible, because sometimes people don't hear about things until the last minute, get your tickets ASAP. We're coming to your town and we want to meet you. We've got Australia-only merch as well.
Oh yeah, we made cutie little pins. Of course, Robin Williams is a delight to work with on RV. One thing that I don't want to skip is she talks about being on TRL and meeting another pop star. Do you think this is Christina Aguilera?
Should we look it up? I think we could figure it out. We'll look it up for the Patreon.
Yeah. She talks about this pop star who is just like truly so fucking mean to her. And she doesn't name her, but she's like, this was someone that I had been obsessed with. And she was so mean to me in the hallways of TRL. And at this point, JoJo does have a #1 hit. She's not just like a random girl at TRL. The reason I think it's Christina is because earlier in the book, when she's introducing the fact that she went to a Britney Spears concert, she's like, I was a Christina girl, but I went to a Britney Spears concert. And now later to be like, this is a girl that I loved so much.
Interesting. We'll look it up because she does give some other clues so we can figure it out. Also, while she's filming these movies, they're getting word that Barry has been sending goons to her agent's office at ICM in LA, all to intimidate him and let him know who was running the show. After that, Brian felt a bit nervous walking around by himself, which made sense considering that Barry allegedly had a number of skeletons in his closet by then. Mom, however, was pissed beyond belief and felt responsible for my sweet, innocent, musical theater-loving agent now questioning if it was safe to pull into his garage alone at night.
Yikes.
I mean, I do think they like got involved with some people who like were a part of the version of the music industry that could be dangerous.
Yeah. Should we watch Aquamarine for the Patreon?
I've never seen it.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
I know.
I can't believe she was like filming Aquamarine and her agent was like, I'm having my life threatened.
That is so funny to kill someone over Aquamarine. Okay, and now are you guys ready for the biggest blast from the past? Ashley didn't know who this was, but I was like, this is so important. I can't believe I'm hearing that name again.
Claire played soccer.
Do you guys remember Freddie Adu? The fucking soccer prodigy signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Sierra Mist. Does Sierra Mist still exist?
No, it's called Starry.
Really?
Yeah, it like rebranded in a commercial with Keke Palmer.
I love her, but I missed that one. So she met Freddie Adu because he was 16 and I was 14, and they were both young phenoms.
They started DMing or like texting, AIM chatting. He was playing in Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she was back in Foxborough for a little while. So they finally met up and they became boyfriend and girlfriend. They had a very on-again, off-again relation for a couple of years. Oh my God. She also does a rock and roll gymnastics tour as like the musical act because her mom is dating the guy who's organizing the rock and roll gymnastics tour. That's tough stuff. And at this point, her mom has relapsed.
By this point, she'd fully fallen off the wagon and Chianti had become a part of her nightly routine. The decision to put me on that whack-ass tour sure sounds wine-induced. It is so funny to have a number one hit and then be like on the ice-capades because your mom's fucking a guy.
It's why you can't be a child star.
Ugh, it's why I have to go to all my dad's birthday parties, though. I'm a podcaster. I've got bigger fish to fry, Mom.
So on this tour, she gets drunk for the first time. Her mom freaks out.
I'm a failure. I've failed it as a parent. I've lost her. My baby. Look at her. It would be years before I even looked at alcohol again.
So they go back to Foxborough for the holidays. She and Freddie, things get cooking between them. I felt beautiful and desired in the way he looked at me. We laughed a ton. We also kind of reveled in the attention that came with us being seen together in a small town like Foxborough. Her
mom goes, "Don't you fucking have sex, you underage whore." And she goes, "I would never." And then guess what she does?
So she has her first kiss with Freddie, and then a couple months later, they do it.
And she feels very pressured into having sex with him because he's 16. He obviously works with adult men. He had been with many women. And her friends are all worried that he doesn't like her for the right reasons, that maybe he's more interested in the clout that they have when they're together.
It's possible.
Money and success absolutely made a lot of things flow more easily for us, but not everything felt totally stable by the time 2005 rolled around. Barry and Mom's relationship was now pretty strained, and I could feel the tension brewing, even though no one really talked about it with me directly. Barry also wasn't in the studio as much this time around, which I was totally fine with. All I needed was Vincent.
Vincent comes to her with a song that Ruth Ann Cunningham, Josh Alexander, and Billy Steinberg wrote called Too Little, Too Late.
She didn't like it at all, but then once she cut it, she changes her mind and she's like, actually, there's a beat here.
As empowered as I felt in the studio with Billy and Josh, the months leading up to the release of the second album exposed me to a whole new side of the business. Oh my God, she was working with Scott Storch.
I know, how crazy. Which is where she was like pissed because he had models walking around everywhere doing blow, and they kept being like, "Can you get your models away from our teenage daughter?" And she's like, "Mom didn't know I had had sex already, so I didn't care." And I was like, everybody's wrong. Every single one of you is wrong in what you think. You're wrong in thinking you're an adult woman who should be in this situation. She's wrong in thinking if she tells the naked models doing blow to keep it in a different room, that's good. Scott Storch, wrong. If you're interested in Scott Storch, he's one of the most fascinating musical highs and lows, like Burn Bright Like the Sun and then Dead Like a Phoenix, who last life Phoenix, a 9 lives Phoenix, 9th life. We did a Patreon episode with Troy McGeady from...
No, I think we did an episode of Dunzo about him.
I think we did both.
Oh. Anyway, ask Troy.
There are people in her life who are giving her good advice. This guy, Billy, says how important publishing could be. He told me that I had something special and unique to contribute as a creative, that I should be a part of creating songs going forward. Mom had said the same thing for years, but it didn't hit the same. I mean, that's valid. If your mom's like, "You're so talented," that doesn't really mean anything. Moms are stupid. Moms don't know anything. But if an industry professional is like, "No, you're pretty good at this," that's more valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm not kidding. A compliment from your mom is nothing. I definitely wanted to be involved in the whole process, but my label always pushed back. It seemed like they wanted me to focus on being a vessel for songs, not a songwriter.
She and her mom are fighting a lot, and then Barry does the craziest thing of all, which is he flies the dad out to LA and goes, "You have to fight for full custody. Get the mom fucking out of here."
She's ruining your daughter's career by not letting me, the man who may or may not have killed my niece Aaliyah, run the show.
And so he starts a custody battle, and then JoJo in court has to be like, "Okay, actually, ultimately, I think my mom is the better choice." Because the dad, I guess they're both relapsed at this point.
They're both relapsed, but she doesn't even say my mom is the better choice. She says, "I feel more loyalty to my mom, and I think if I say no to my mom, she'll like kill herself."
Yeah.
Literally. Former memoirists mention, "While we were making stuff in Miami, I learned that Timbaland and Static, two breakout creatives signed to Blackground, were working in the studio next to us. I'd heard a lot about Tim. Not only were we label mates, but his sound had changed music and more. Still, it had become somewhat common knowledge in the industry that he and Barry had a sour relationship, especially after Aaliyah's passing." Anyway, if you're interested more in Timbaland and Missy Elliott.
Interesting then that he signed to Blackground.
I wonder if Barry's name had been changed for the book. Because Barry isn't like ringing a bell to me. And a lot of these other names are.
Yeah.
So her mom's mental health is deteriorating. Like, although it was wrong to fly out the father, an adult needed to step up and help out with JoJo because her mom was falling apart. The closer I got to my 15th year, the further I pulled away from my mom. I felt like she was always disapproving of something or mad at someone, often me, hating everything about the music industry and threatening to pull me out of it and make me go back to public school daily. The truth was that she could have literally put a stop to everything at any moment if she wanted to.
Mom threatened to end her life a lot, particularly when I was a teenager, saying I'd be happier that way. I knew she'd been through the most devastating loss imaginable when she was 3. I knew she was a recovering alcoholic and was actively battling depression, but it still made me fully furious and absolutely terrified whenever she talked like that. Yeah.
She would scream at her, "You're acting like a disgusting, ungrateful, spoiled brat. The industry has sucked all the goodness out of you. You're fucking ruined." These jabs were increasingly common and they hissed out of her mouth more easily when she was under the influence. She was the only one in the fucking world who actually told me the truth. Everybody was thinking it, but they didn't have the balls to say it. I knew she loved me, but she also deeply resented and possibly even hated me now, and I hated her back then too. Her extended family is like worried about her. She says that everyone's always trying to like diagnose what's wrong with her mom, and she's like, it doesn't even matter what the diagnosis is. What's wrong is like that I'm existing here. But she didn't want anybody to overreact or worry about her. Of course, her number one concern and priority is keeping the record deal afloat. So she's trying to shoulder this burden by herself at 15 years old.
With fame.
And like kind of crazy business people.
Yeah. So then RV and Aquamarine come out in 2006. It's like a huge moment. Superstardom was around the corner. There I was, 15 years old, expanding my career as a musical artist and an actress, never running from hard work, supported by my boyfriend, family. With the Hollywood starlet look, I had everything going for me.
So then she talks about how Barry sits her down and is like, you can't be dating Freddie Adu. It's a bad look. And it's so interesting. She says like the whole team says that if she's dating a black guy, that ruins her ability to be the great white hope. A black female executive took the time to sit me down in Universal office and convey some of the nuances of racism and even colorism, gently explaining that I might alienate more than one section of my fan base if I, a white girl, was dating a dark-skinned black man. And she's just kind of like, wait, what? Why?
This is something that kind of comes up for her a lot as she's pursuing various relationships throughout her life. That like her manager, her agents, like people are always very concerned about the optics of her being pretty consistently in an interracial relationship. Yeah. And she's constantly fighting back.
And it's like ironic because she is doing like black music. She is in the R&B hip hop world. And they're like, we love that about you. And we love that you're white, but you cannot date a black man.
Yeah.
So Too Little Too Late comes out. It's the first single and it goes from number 66 to number 3 in the span of a week. They can't even believe it. They thought they ran the numbers wrong. It was the single biggest jump in the chart's history, a record previously held by Mariah Carey. And I get it, because that's a good song. The minute I saw those words, I was like, oh, that was such a
really good song.
Shortly after Too Little Too Late came out, Vincent vanished into thin air. It was actually unreal. And she is fucking heartbroken because to her, he had been like a father figure, an older brother, someone she had relied on and gone through this industry with for 4 years. I think he was the first person to really connect with her, almost as a colleague, to believe in her. He had promised he would buy her a car for her 16th birthday. And then he was just gone.
He started working with other artists. He just never returned her calls. He never got back to her. She thinks it had a lot to do with the tension at the record label and the way her career was being managed.
He was also dating Toni Braxton's sister, Tamar. And he's like, I don't know, something was happening between him and Barry.
Mm-hmm.
But it really breaks her heart feeling rejected by this man because it's not just like personally, but it also feels professionally. I just think in so many different ways, she like cannot handle it. She can't lose these people that are kind of parental figures in her life.
He starts working with Lady Gaga. And at one point, like a year or so later, she goes to a Lady Gaga show and he kind of brings her and he says hi to her. And she just has this moment watching Gaga perform where she's like, well, I'm not Lady Gaga. Vincent is never coming back to me.
And once again, it's like, well, I'm not good enough to keep people in my life. So Blackground is adding more artists. It seems like JoJo met them in a lull and now they're like back at it. And so she has less of their attention, which is good and a bad thing. Barry was overheard saying he didn't need Mom and Me anymore. So she's getting older and it's time to start applying to college. And like people are doing, like her mom is acting so fucking weird. And you guys know we're anti-child stars. But her mom essentially goes to Universal, who Blackground has a record deal with. Like they do the distribution.
A distribution deal, yeah.
And her mom behind her back goes to a woman at Universal and essentially says, I don't know if I want her to keep doing music. She really wanted me to focus on finishing school and getting out of the industry. Those were her dreams, not mine. I wasn't present at the meeting. She earnestly insisted that I was a brilliant student, that I could go to college and be anything I wanted. Mel told her in no uncertain terms that if that was the case, we should stop wasting everyone's time and not even try to make anything until I graduated college. Welp. Okay, what do you mean go to college and be anything she wants? She wants to be a fucking pop star and she is. It's too goddamn late to go. She's not going to be a marine biologist.
Too little, too late.
I don't even care if she never makes another hit again. At this point in life, you don't just like go back and become a teacher.
Yeah.
Like she's in the industry for life. As we've seen, she'll like eke out a path in some direction. She'll do a reality show on Oxygen. She'll become a vocal coach. I don't know. She'll do something, but like she's not going to fucking college.
Can I say, or if she didn't like it, she could go to college and just do something else.
But she's like, it's not like she's been at it 10 years and you're like, well, it didn't work out. Why don't you just go to college? Like she now has like top 10 hits, multiple. Why are you grinding it to a fucking halt now that it's finally age appropriate for her to be pursuing it full time?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because now that she was approaching 18, her mom was worried about what it would be for her out of her clutches.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if like the idea of her doing this when she had control of her own life and wasn't a minor anymore was like more than the mom could bear. And so she was sabotaging her.
Maybe.
Because it is so weird to move your 11-year-old to LA for pilot season and then talk to the head of Universal and say, well, what do you want your hit making daughter to do next? And say, go to college. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
So that she could actually be what she wants to be. What does she want to be?
So she decides that she does not want to put out another album until she's 18. So she spends a couple years just kind of bopping around. She makes a Lifetime movie
called True Confessions of a Hollywood Starlet, which was based loosely on Lindsay Lohan. And she's like, yeah, people had said I looked like Lindsay Lohan. And I looked at, they do. She does look like her. She has that kind of like working class Irish face.
And she's just kind of like figuring stuff out for a couple of years. She's in Canada. She comes back and gets a condo. She's coming into some money as she turns 18.
Her Coogan account.
And then she like reunites with her dad. She hasn't seen him in a long time. And he comes to dinner at her aunt and uncle's house, high as a goddamn kite.
Like fell asleep on his lasagna. And she was supposed to drive back with him and spend the night with him for the weekend. And she's like, yeah, I can't get in a car with him. And she just doesn't see him again for a while.
She also gets drunk that night. And it's one of the first times that she remembers just numbing her grief with alcohol.
So what happens now is essentially Blackground and Universal split ways.
Yeah. So Blackground is a record label. There are smaller or moderately independent record labels that, because album distribution, especially with physical distribution, is such a monster, you then partner with bigger labels that have distribution capabilities to have the distribution rights to the records that the record label is creating. So Blackground was producing records and was the record label and then was distributing them via Universal. They split with Universal and did not have a new distribution partner. So anything they made and produced could not go anywhere because this is before the digital age of music, where like if you weren't putting an album onto CDs and getting it into stores, it didn't exist.
She also is like at odds with her mom, who is her manager until she's an adult. So basically she's like, well, they can't make music. Why don't I just like hang out? I hate the shit they're sending me. She did not want to go in this pop direction they keep pushing her into. So she kind of just assumes, what if we just ride this wave, see what happens, take a step back and not keep putting out music I hate that can't even go anywhere. And at 18, we'll reassess.
Someone else that she had worked with at Blackground left the company and wanted to start managing. And from this point forward, they start working with JoJo. And JoJo only calls her MM, my manager.
And I kind of wonder why. I guess because they have a sort of tumultuous relationship at the end.
Yeah.
I wonder if like she is still trying to be in her good graces or if that woman went on to success. Like I wonder what the specific reason for why she doesn't use her name is.
Me too.
So she gets this new manager and she says, I don't want to take mom out of the equation when it came to my career. I thought she had some great ideas and together we had defied all the odds, but it was undeniable that working with her was getting harder by the day.
And as she's working with this new manager, becoming closer with this new manager, her mom is in a very precarious place mentally. And when JoJo was like in the studio with this woman, she has started asking her mom not to come to the studio because she can see so much emotion and opinion on her mom's face.
Yeah, she says like every time I look at my mom, I can see if she thinks I'm doing a good job or not. And it makes me so anxious I can't sing.
But because she uninvites her mom to the studio, her mom then calls her and is like, okay, it would be better without me. And so she has to run back and protect her mom, who is again threatening to take her own life.
Like naked, crying in the hotel room. And then go back down to meet with the producers to keep recording a new song. Like this is in the middle of her workday. And as soon as she comes back up to the hotel room, her mom disappears for weeks. Nobody hears from her. 2 weeks later, she returned. I came home one night with my boyfriend to see her passed out naked in the living room with an empty bottle right next to her. My sweet boyfriend carried her upstairs and helped me put her to bed.
So she moves back to Boston for a little while.
She's finally 18 at this point, so she can like move out on her own.
She gets this cool loft apartment that becomes just an absolute party hub. She's thinking about going to Northeastern University and she verbally commits, but ends up not going, but she is like partying with other 18-year-olds and young college-age kids.
Being desired was like a drug to me, but my one and only experience with a professional athlete had scarred me to the point where I wasn't looking for a repeat event. I wanted to be wanted, but that's as far as it went. So she's like the biggest celebrity in Boston, basically.
Yeah.
And she's really living it up, but like in a very Boston college style way. Like she's using it to get free Jameson shots at like dive bars with her friends, which is the way to do it. Unless, of course, you have a drinking problem and are using it to hide from the despair of your flailing career and like horrible relationship with your parents.
If she hadn't been horribly grieving a couple of terrible relationships during this time and like really hard family situations, it would have sounded awesome.
By the summer of 2009, it had been almost 3 years since the release of my second album. Blackground still didn't have a distribution nor the structure to put music out. To say I was growing impatient would be an understatement, but it was around the time when a lot of social media platforms like MySpace, Twitter, and YouTube were starting to get super popular, and I jumped at the chance to connect with my fans. I didn't want them to feel like I'd forgotten about them.
So I also think that the distribution deal has to do with like the marketing of an album. So without it, they really can't do anything.
And things are getting worse and worse, it seems, with the Barry Blackground situation. A couple months later, after no movement whatsoever, we officially initiated a lawsuit against a family and Blackground to nudge them to make a move.
So she wants to either put an album out or get released from her contract. Okay, so this part of the book becomes a bit difficult and convoluted and like frustrating. And I don't begrudge her for it because what the time she's illustrating is like difficult and convoluted and frustrating. So she spends the next like 3 or 4 years producing music with Blackground and trying to put out another album. I think eventually they work out a deal with Interscope as a distributing partner, but like they're not putting her music out. They won't agree to push any of her music. They keep on sending her back to the studio and being like, we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this. And she's signed to a 7-album deal. And if they won't put out an album, then she'll forever be in this deal. And so that, I think, is when she pursues another lawsuit against them, but we're not there yet. So she, for a couple of years, records hundreds of songs.
250 songs, she says.
She doesn't like a lot of them. A lot of times, she'll work on a handful of songs she really loves with her producer friend Jordan, and then the studio will come to her with a song and be like, we want you to make this one. And she'll be like, well, I hate that one. And then her manager will be like, well, don't you want the studio to like eventually put out an album of yours? Because she's walking this very bizarre and difficult line where she like wants out of this contract, but she also has to play nice in case they should change their mind and then agree to put out an album.
She also wants to be R&B, and she was like bred to be R&B basically by her own record label. But then whenever it comes push to shove, they're like, well, you should be doing pop because pop is what's successful. Pop is what has been successful. And then they also do this thing to her that it's so frustrating. They do it till she gets out of the contracts altogether, where everybody in her life will go, well, you were wrong about Leave, Get Out. So like whenever she's like, this is not the song for me. I do not like this song. This song does not resonate with me. It doesn't show off my vocal range. It's not what I want to do. They go, yeah, but you were wrong about Leave, Get Out. Okay. A lot of people are wrong about things at 12. A lot of people are wrong about things at 12. I was wrong about every single multiplication pattern.
It ends up just like eroding her confidence for years and years.
On top of that, when they do sign with Interscope, Interscope is known for being very particular about women's bodies. And her manager is very hard on her. Everybody is super hard on her about how small she should be. She's like a naturally tiny but kind of curvy woman. And they're always telling her to get smaller. They're always telling her she needs to lose weight and present herself better. And she begins a pretty tough binge eating habit, which I wonder how she gets out of it or if she is out of it to this day.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of talk about how much she's doing. And I'm like, I know that ravages your brain. And I'm not sure if it ends. It just stops getting talked about.
I think when she gets really into like health and wellness, I think she's able to like...
You would hope, but I don't know.
But I don't know.
But she's a big like starve yourself all day and then go home and in the privacy of your home, like binge until you fall asleep.
So she's also very uncomfortable in her skin. She's very self-conscious, and it leads to her also binge drinking quite a lot. And she has a couple different situations where she blacked out in the presence of a man who you cannot trust. And there was like one man who was much older than her and she'd had a fairly professional relationship with, who claims she made a move on him and she was blacked out. And it leads her down this rabbit hole of like, was it not obvious that I have no control over what's happening?
She's also in a situation where like one time my manager and Katie came to the rescue from a session where I had discreetly texted them from the corner of our room saying this producer locked the door, wouldn't let me leave the studio, and was trying to get me to drink more than I wanted to so that I couldn't drive. He wouldn't take no for an answer. As she turns 18, she enters a lot of these situations where the producers, the writers, the people she's working with become quite predatory. And she becomes a frequent binge drinker. She is somebody that does ultimately, I think, turn to sex for validation. Ultimately, her therapist is like, you're a sex addict.
Yeah. She ends up really just like hardening up because I think one of the effects of her career stalling, everyone kind of questioning her and leading her into this headspace where she can't trust her own self or her own decision-making skills, where they tell her everything she does isn't good enough, or they tell her her body isn't good enough. Like the fact that from age 15 to now 21, all she's been told is you're wrong about yourself, you're wrong about everything, and you're not
Your
pretty.
instincts are off. Yeah.
It like leads her to this place where she is operating like a spinning top. She has no center. I guess a spinning top has distinctly a center.
She's very hollowed out. And I think especially when you experience the high highs of that much fame and that much success, especially on like a pubescent brain, like I feel like that does chemically alter you because how do you feel that again? Like what she is chasing is like, she's been there.
Yeah. And now she has this dream of making the type of music she wants to make, but she's also a bit lost in what that music even is because she's gotten so far away from her center.
Yeah. And it's also always that, well, you didn't like leave Get Out. Like, should we do what's always worked or should we do what we want to work?
Yeah.
So she starts dating one of her musicians who's like a Pentecostal evangelist, whatever. That's intense. And she's like going to church with him and she has to admit to him that she cheats on him. He doesn't take it well. I will say I think she's better off without an evangelical man in her life.
Yeah. From ages 19 to 24, I wrote and or cut over 200 strong, striving for perfection and acceptance in the process. They won't put out anything. I internalized that I didn't know what was best for me as a core truth. I damn near lived in the studio during those years and I loved every second of it, but I hated sitting on the sidelines without any fucking clue as to what the plan or the problem was. She's also not hearing from Barry and the label execs directly. She's just getting notes through her manager. And after years of limbo, like her fans online are like, where are you? And they start this free JoJo campaign. It's been at this point 9 years since she put out a record.
The music industry was and still is in many ways a very small fishbowl. Behind the scenes, there were all these songs I was working on that were getting amazing responses from people and they would never come out. That I'd hear a very similar vibe or melody or concept that another artist managed to release. For every step I took forward, it felt like I was falling 4 steps behind, like I was always looking like I was late chasing a trend when I had been the one pushing things forward in the first place without getting any of the recognition at all.
She also ends up putting out a mixtape because she looks into the legality of it. And if she's not making any money, she can put music out technically.
She names it Can't Take That Away From Me and puts it out in September 2010. She does a cover of Marvin's Room that goes super viral that people love. She does like her own spin on it. I mean, people are really responding to the music she's putting out there, but nobody in the industry seems to care. They all want to bank on a safe bet. And on the other side, she's like drinking more and more. I feel like it's hard for her to stand up for herself in the industry because she shows up to this Interscope Christmas party and like gets so drunk, she like rips her clothes.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have any direct access to any of her record label people. Everything's being done through the manager who also doesn't really believe in her and doesn't line up with her sensibilities wise. Like, not that it's her fault, but it does seem like there's just so many filters in place that like nothing can get through the sieve.
There's just no one on her side, including herself, really, because she's so afraid to stand up for herself.
They start picking on the way she dresses. Like her manager does not like the way she styles herself, does not like the kind of music she wants. I mean, it gets really bad.
At one point, they want her to declare bankruptcy in order to get out of this contract with Blackground. And she's like, I grew up poor. We don't do that. And her money manager, now she's like, oh, they were trying to teach me how rich people act, which is that like money is a concept and you just like do whatever you want to do.
But she's like, yeah, I wasn't going to go back to my working class town and be like, I'm out of money. I think she's also worried about the perception. She just didn't get it. But I will say they're trying to make her get skinny. And she says she ends up going to a weight loss doctor who put her on a strict protocol of weigh-ins, injections, and 500 calories a day plus supplements.
What the fuck?
I learned all about nutrition and intermittent fasting. I don't know you're learning about nutrition if you're eating 500 calories a day. It seems like you're forgetting about nutrition. How this shot they wanted me to take would trick my body into thinking I was pregnant, taking the food that would normally be reserved for a baby and instead allowing me to excrete it out. What shot is that? I've never heard of that.
Jesus
Have
Christ.
you?
No.
Have you guys? Is that what Ally was?
It seems like it.
Because I know Allie made you poop out all your fat, right?
I think
like
so.
If you ate foods with fat content in it,
it would just shoot right through you.
But I was like, dang.
Ugh.
Ozempic, who? Anyway, she did all that to be in a music video that they never even put out.
And then her and her manager are just trying to get out of this contract. They're trying to find a loophole. They're trying to figure something out.
This abusive relationship that barely gets mentioned, but she's like, we're fighting, we're screaming. It's always going from verbal to physical. He's pushing me down on the concrete. They're blacking out all the time. She's always dating men who live with their mom.
Yeah.
That's like her fetish. She like loves a man who lives with his mom, and she's always showing up to their mom's house to scream at them through the window to be like, I know you're in there, which is
tough stuff.
If you know they're in there and they're not coming out, you don't win by saying, I know. You actually lose when you go, I know you're in there and you're not coming out.
She gets invited to Solange Knowles' birthday party, and her manager have like a very choreographed making of the rounds where all the label execs are like, why don't we have you on our label? And she's like, oh, if only I could get out of this horrible contract. Kind of like priming the industry for her return to the market.
And she says it's hard to have everybody like pity you, but like nobody can do anything.
She even gets invited to Taylor Swift's house with Selena Gomez.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor's like, oh, what's happening to you? I can't believe it.
She also takes a photo with Solange, and I guess she's not wearing a bra because it's a dress and she's 19, 20. And people online say that her boobs look droopy, which I looked it up. They don't. They just look like huge D's sitting as they sit.
So she gets a boob lift
by adding more boob and augmentation to lift them up. And she's like, it hurt. I don't like it. It wasn't worth the money. I should have gone to rehab. So if you're thinking about getting a boob job, ask yourself, should I go to rehab instead?
Yeah. Or should I just X out of this comment section?
She does a music video and they tell her that everything about her is wrong. They have to reshoot the whole thing. They lit her wrong. Her like legs look unflattering. They don't like how her hair and makeup looks. I should have gotten a darker tan. My face was too intense whenever I was delivering the lyrics. I wasn't being sexy enough. Scratch that. I wasn't being sexy at all.
Her parents are both spiraling. She's constantly calling the police to do welfare checks on her mom.
Her dad keeps ODing and ending up in the hospital.
I lived in constant fear that my life could change in an instant. At any moment, I knew I was going to get the phone call that one of them had died.
She's also in this lawsuit where she's suing Blackground basically to say, please let me out of this contract.
And finally, they do.
It turns out that there is this loophole in New York State where if you are a minor, you cannot sign away a contract to services rendered for more than 7 years. At this point, it had been 10 years since she had signed that contract. I guess she's 22 at this point. And so she's 3 years past due date and she's free. She's out. She sends them the cease and desist or whatever, and they kind of say, fine, take your shit and go. So she gets a dog named Agape for some reason.
Well, not for some reason. It means unconditional love.
Oh. She wants to try to save her dad. Her dad has been in the ICU a lot. She decides maybe it's his environment that's the problem. So she brings him out to a rehab connected to the church she goes to in Echo Park. And after getting him out there and kind of fantasizing about this life where he could be her tour manager and be a part of her life and he'll be walking and the sunshine, he like breaks out in the middle of the night and flies back. So it's just kind of like years of heartbreak like this, of her parents just relapsing, getting calls, wondering if they're dead or alive. Like this constant anxiety that like, it's horrible when they're in her life. It's worse when they're not.
And so then she signs with Atlantic Records and with Aaron Bay Shuck. He's her A&R guy, and an A&R is artist and repertoire. And what that means is it's the person who kind of helps you develop and shape your album and your sound. So you need to like really vibe with your A&R person because they're the person who's like bringing you the tracks and the songwriters and the producers that make sense for you to be collaborating with to make the next album. Like if you're on a bad page with your A&R person, you're not going to make a good album.
So she finally finds this guy that totally gets her. He gets that she was pop, but still heavily R&B. He gives her a bunch of songs that he either wanted me to finish writing or just cut. It was feeling like we were completely on the same wavelength. I stayed in the studio day in and day out, laying down what I thought were my absolute best vocal performances. I would come out of the booth vibrating, feeling like I had just left my soul in that motherfucker. I was coming for blood. She has all of these boyfriends and everybody's cheating on everybody. It's the craziest thing I've ever
There's so much cheating in this book.
I've never seen more cheating. And you guys know me. I'm like, okay, well, you were 18, whatever. But I'm like, this is insane. She has a boyfriend for 2 years. He cheats on her. She's like, now I get what my songs were about. Every boyfriend is basically cheating on her and she cheats on most of them. So she's going to a therapist at this point who's like, by the way, the reason you keep picking men who have nothing going on for them is because you feel like safe with them because you assume they have nothing but you in their lives. You don't even like these guys. And she's like, Not that it's right that they're cheating on you, but have you ever thought about what it must be like to be the guy that someone's with because he has nothing going on in his life? And I stand by that. I actually agree. You can't just like date a loser because then they get too big for their britches.
She starts banging one of her producers.
It's chaotic.
She's known for a long time. They just have this like very sexual and intense relationship. And
very
then she's
drug
like,
fueled.
Jesus Christ, I actually hate him. That's tough stuff.
Yeah, doing Molly. The drugs made me feel like nothing was off limits. Let people see us. I don't care. Forget the condom. I don't care. Film it. I don't care. Yeah, I think girls are hot. I'll call up a girlfriend and invite her to join in on the fun. I don't care. Molly to come up and Indica to come down.
And then Aaron is like, I think you should work with a different producer. And she's like, good. I was trying to figure out how to break up with him. And then Aaron gets a job at Interscope. So Aaron is like kind of a savant, it seems.
I guess the reason he was such a great A&R guy is like actually a double-edged sword.
He's incredible at his job.
Because he, 4 months in, as Ashley said, gets to become the president of A&R at Interscope. And that's obviously not a job he can give up. And they're like, well, do you want to go with him? And she's like, no, I can't leave Atlantic. And I also don't want to be back near Barry. Let me just stay here and see how it goes. However, of course, as soon as he leaves, nobody else really gives a shit about her. She has like multiple people that work with her. Nobody's on the same page. And everyone thinks all this really great R&B pop that she's been working on, everyone hates it. They're like, no. Can you do Leave, Get Out Part 2?
And her manager does not really stick up for her. No one is in her corner at the record label anymore. So once again, everything she's been working on is essentially dumped into a trash.
And again, her manager is not even on her side. She's like, first you get famous, then you can do whatever you want. The thing is, she's been famous.
Yeah.
And I think like the craziest thing about this book is seeing the way that you can keep banging down the wall with like a blunt spoon that is just not strong enough, as opposed to like take a left and try a new route. The way that 15 years or something, this manager of hers keeps being like, but if you just do what they say, if you just dress a little prettier and lose a little weight, if you just keep denying who you really are, then you'll be a pop star and then you can do whatever you want to do next. And it's like, she's not going to be a fucking pop star. There never was a swimming pool, you slut. I'm sorry, but if it doesn't work for 10 years in a row, why not try a second thing?
I don't think this manager really had strong experience in the industry, and she certainly was a horrible advocate for her one client. It's tough to look at.
They also
for 100
have a really
pages.
Codependent relationship where she's like, she was basically my mom. She would do my laundry. She would cover my dinner. She would like be there for me when I was crying all the time. And I was like, I don't know that your manager is supposed to be doing your laundry.
This is tough.
So they keep giving her music she does not want to do, like the song When Love Hurts. She does it. It sucks. She wanted to do songs that felt tailored to me, that only I could deliver. This felt like the quintessential insert female artist here kind of song, totally void of identity. I call this bodega music. It's every Haley Steinfeld song. If Selena Gomez wasn't as famous as she is, it would be Selena Gomez songs.
I mean, there is just this type of music where they'll plug any female vocalist onto it and expect it to do well. And that's just not true. This is the argument I used to have with my ex-boyfriend constantly, where he would be like, Britney Spears is just like a mouthpiece for other people's artistry. And I was like, no, because if anyone could sing it, then anyone would.
Then why can't they make Camila Cabello happen?
Like, if you think only singer-songwriters are true artists, then why are the people who are writing these international hit songs not the ones performing them? Mm-hmm. If anyone could perform it, why wouldn't they perform their own songs?
She like shoots a video for this song and is drunk the whole time. And her manager's like, you're an addict. And she goes, send me to rehab then. You think I do fucking heroin? Why can't I have some drinks with friends? And it's like, well, you're at work. You are at work.
So then she's dating this older guy
who's very zen.
Very on again, off again relationship. He's zen in a way where he's actually evil and he's constantly cheating on her.
And her manager is always like, this is bad for your image. I'm sorry. Nobody's looking at like the way that they're like, if anyone finds out you're dating a yogi, I'm like, who is checking?
Also, it's not bad for her image. It's bad for her fucking soul to be dating a guy who is an asshole.
Who fucking cares who JoJo's dating? I'm sorry.
I know.
She couldn't get anybody at these record labels to call her back. The idea that somebody was going to care who she was dating, we wish they cared who she was dating.
Can I tell you the sad truth? Is that no one cared to the point that when I looked up JoJo dating history,
nothing came up.
Very little. Like only the two prominent, Freddie Adu, and then the guy she was engaged to come up.
It's just so weird. She ends up in these relationships with all these super controlling women. It's very bizarre.
Well, because she's been eroded to this point.
I guess that's what happens is when you're like too old when you're 13, you never properly go through the stages of maturing.
Yes.
So then you think, okay, I'm 24 and my manager, who's not even your boss.
Like the horrible irony of her life is that starting so young meant that like once she was of age, she was completely handcuffed by her own insecurities, by her own reputation, by her own functional abilities as an adult in the world.
Yeah, it's like the problem with becoming a famous person young is that when you're 13, you shouldn't be the breadwinner for your family. And when you're 25, you shouldn't be under the thumb of your manager.
Right. And so now because she got famous too young, like in 5 years between 13 and 18, right? Because her mom agreed to those 5 years, then she lost 18 to 26.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, they break up because he cheated on her. This Bengali-like guy, this guy who was all about meditating and finding inner peace and being honest and open. He cheats on her. They break up. She sneaks him into her hotel in Arizona on tour. Nobody is allowed to know because everybody hates him so much.
And he's obsessively apologizing.
And desperate to get back with her. And then as he leaves, in the morning, I watched from bed as he packed up his duffel bag. As he walked toward the door and reached for the handle, I got the call I always expected but never wanted to get. Dad was dead. When I read that, I gasped.
Me too.
She obviously freaks out.
Destroyed with grief. He wanted to stay clean, to sing with me on stage one day and be a grandfather. He had this like really difficult surgery and survived it and then not.
Well, he was like abusing drugs constantly. And his own doctor had said, by the way, I want to let you know, like, he's definitely getting prescription painkillers from other doctors. I'm not giving him more than he needs, but I can tell that he's getting more than he needs.
And he needed painkillers because he was recovering from full surgery. So she's having a bit of a meltdown.
But she just keeps working. 2 days after Dad passed, I kept my obligation to sing the national anthem at a NASCAR rally.
Because Dad was patriotic. But really, it was because this was when she's finally getting an opportunity to make waves again with her career.
She continues the tour. In my mind, there just wasn't another option. I had just restarted my official recording career, and it felt like there was too much riding on this moment. She says it was ultimately therapeutic, and then after the tour bus driver took her all the way to her dad's house so she could sort through his stuff and do his memorial.
Then she decides to take herself on sort of a solo retreat, and she becomes one with the earth.
So she ends up naming her third album Mad Love. And she's like, it means a couple of things. It means that like I love a lot of people, but then also my family used to say Mad Love. And I was like, okay, well, that's two things. Like that's like the same thing.
Yeah, she has like mad love for the people in her life.
I was like, I thought it would be really smart to be like, plus the way that like my love has so much anger in it because of my relationship with my parents and how often I've been cheated on.
Oh,
And
no.
I was like, that would have been a good second meeting.
No, it's not.
It's that sometimes she feels it for friends and sometimes she feels it for family.
So now she's back at the record label office. She runs into Bruno Mars, who's so nice to her. And he's like, oh, do you want to come have coffee with me and the CEO of the record label? And she's like, no.
She is so fucking tied up with anxiety that she is not allowed to talk to anybody at the label, anybody in her business life without her manager present on the phone. And she was like, well, why would he want to talk to me? What if my manager gets mad? So she says no.
And she has this realization afterwards where she's like, why would I say no to an incredible opportunity presented to my fucking face?
Bruno was literally offering me a seat at the table. What could have come from just seeing what happened? Why did I run from all these opportunities before I even got a real taste of what they could become?
It's because no one has ever told her she's capable.
In therapy, I later learned that I had started operating in a state called learned helplessness, which occurs after a person repeatedly experiences stressful situations and comes to believe in their bones that they are unable to change things. I feel like it's different for men and women.
Yeah.
I feel like when men do it, it's because like they don't want to have to use the carburetor. Weaponized incompetence, actually. That's what they have.
Oh, yeah. They have weaponized incompetence.
Anyway, so she puts out this album and she keeps getting opening positions and she really has to humble herself and take the hit to her ego. She's like, is it humiliating for me at this stage of my career to be opening for other people? Yes. But she ends up agreeing to be like a guest, a special guest on the Fifth Harmony tour. And she goes, they were the biggest girl group around at the time with a massive following around the world. They were doing packed amphitheaters and arenas. And I was like, really?
They were really big. That's why we know who Camila Cabello is.
I know, but mostly I know them from the threads on Twitter about what a must they were.
Yeah. And how did we get those must moments?
I don't know. Lots of little things become big things on the internet. I didn't know that they were actually packing out amphitheaters.
Anyway, it is one of those things where I feel bad that she's having to take what she deems a step backwards. But at this point, she's put out mixtapes. She's been active on YouTube. But in the music industry, she hasn't really put out work in a decade.
Also on this tour, however, is Victoria Monet. And she talks about how like every single time she was out there, just unreal, like incredible vocals, incredible choreography, giving it all, superstar energy every day. While the sun was the highest in the sky and sweat dripped down her body to the stage as the crowd trickled in.
Dude, those are videos I want to see.
And she really was like, wow, this is a woman that I know is like beloved in the industry, really recognized for her hard work and talent. And here she is, like sucking it up and just being the opening act and still being a fucking star. And she takes that note and inspiration. And to that I say, Victoria Monet, I want your memoir, please.
Yes.
When Mad Love finally comes out, it performs well, all things considered, and debuted at the number 6 on the Billboard album charts.
That's pretty high.
She's like, it wasn't a huge comeback, but my fans loved it.
And she also decides to take a stand and say, I need more of a say in my music. I can't just be putting out music I don't like, because when I make music I don't like, I, one, don't like it, and B, it's not performing that well anyway. So why can't I just make the music I do like and at least take a risk on that?
She's at this point also slowly falling in love with one of her best friends. And it's like the first great relationship she'd ever been in. And she feels a bit insecure because he comes from a sort of successful music family. She never says who it is, but it seems his family does not really approve of her. They call her a trash bag and a slut and a hot mess.
I wish I could find out who this is.
I know, but they just like live in this cocoon of love where he supports her and he gets her and he understands the music she wants to make. And they like have a really good, healthy relationship for the first time in her life.
He also suggests that she is in a very poor relationship with her manager, who wants her to be in a PR relationship. And she was like, I don't know, maybe I could be in a PR relationship. And he's like, why are you in a manager relationship with someone that you think has terrible ideas most of the time?
Yeah, he's like, you shouldn't have a manager where you come home every day nervous and angry. You shouldn't be constantly fighting with the person who's supposed to represent your best interests.
I mean, it's not till later that after every conversation with her manager, she's like collapsing to the ground sobbing, that she's like, wait, okay, this actually might be so bad.
It's so funny. It's the same thing with a relationship, like a romantic relationship. You shouldn't be coming home and like the one person on your side is the person that hates you the most.
Yeah.
Anyway, she fucks up her voice. She's supposed to go on tour for her personal album and she can no longer sing. And it turns out she's like fucked it up because she never really knew how to sing properly. It was all au naturel. And now she goes to Eric Vitro.
Shout out to Eric Vitro.
And he is like, have you ever taken a rest? Why don't you stop smoking and drinking?
She has to go on full 2-week vocal rest.
And even though she comes back good as new, it's actually not. Now she has all this anxiety about like going too high and ripping her vocal cord. It almost is like how you would feel after an ACL tear. She's like, I don't know. I don't want to like bop too hard and then ruin it forever.
Yeah.
For a while now, I'd been thinking about the fact that I was praised for being good before I developed habits that could make me great. I was strangely young and isolated when I reached the top of a mountain most artists are never able to summit their whole lives, and I never had anyone to really mentor or show me the ropes. Obviously, I'm no doctor, but I can only imagine the impact of fame on a developing brain. A cocktail of adulation and attention mixed with pressure and chaos. Mom was understandably afraid to let other adults close to me before I turned 18, so I was in a protective bubble away from the people who could have hurt me or helped.
Now as an adult, I wish someone had given me some structure, said no, or at least taught me how to function in society, how to cook or clean or fold laundry.
I felt like it was too late, and I was angry at my parents for not being able to teach me for whatever reason, but I knew that holding anyone but myself accountable was unfair and a waste of energy, so I doubled down on blaming myself. Her weight conversations are still out there. She's still binging. She continues to eat. My shame in a cycle of deprivation and binging. I'd eat very healthy and mindfully throughout the day, and then I'd unhinge myself as soon as I was alone in my room.
So finally, after Mad Love comes out and it does fine, she's like, I just need someone in my corner. Aaron, the A&R guy she'd worked with, who then went to become the president of A&R at Interscope, was like, just come over to Interscope. We'll work together again. And so she drops from Atlantic and goes back to Interscope.
And gets her own imprint, Clover Records, under which she could like develop her own artists, which is really cool.
It's really cool. And then immediately Aaron gets a job as the chairman of Warner Records. And she's like, well, what the fuck?
And finally, she's like able to be honest. She's like, this really sucks for me.
Yeah. She's like, I'm happy for you, but boy, oh boy, have I been bouncing around. As the president, you're not going to have time for me. And he says she can come with him, but she just jumped labels again. And she's like, this looks insane.
I don't really know how to say this because a few chapters ago, I told you how much I loved this boyfriend of mine, but I cheated on him, point fucking blank. She cheats on him with like a professional athlete. And then she does it again. She like feels so awful. She goes to therapy and goes, should I tell him? And her therapist is like, well, you're going to do it again. Maybe just like work on yourself and don't break your boyfriend's heart. And then she's like, no, I have to tell him. And then she does it again.
And then when he's like, well, what the fuck? And she's like, and it was twice. The first time was selfish. The second time was diabolical. She also had a friend who she loved collaborating with named Leah LaBelle, who passes away in a car accident very tragically.
I feel like shit is just going bad for her. But now it's 2018 and streaming has changed the game. And Blackground is once again fucking her over because for some reason they will not put her music on Apple or Spotify. That's because this guy, Barry, thinks he's going to make his own Tidal, a la Jay-Z's defunct streaming app.
I think it's still out there.
Tidal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think he like gave up this idea that he'd have exclusives on like Beyonce and Nicki and his own music.
Yeah.
Like remember when you'd have to download the app to listen to Kanye?
Yes.
I think that's done and dusted.
Because no one's really listening to Kanye.
Yeah, but people are listening to Nicki and Beyonce.
That's true. I remember getting the Tidal free trial so that I could listen to Anti by Rihanna.
God, that was a lot of power he had in there.
Yeah.
I cannot believe if they couldn't make it work, I'm sorry.
Who can?
JoJo's old tracks aren't going to make the cut. So she basically is like, I can't fucking take it anymore. I have to take my life back in my control. Streaming wasn't the only thing that jump-started this shift in me. Deep down, I also knew that my team and I needed to reassess the way we operated. I was sick of feeling like a victim of circumstance.
So she ends up jumping over to Warner so that she can work with Aaron again. From my vantage point, I'd been dragged around for years holding on to Aaron's coattails and looking like a spineless moron. And her manager was like, yeah, but that's the best case scenario. And she's like, oh, fuck you, man. I do want to go with him, but also, what the fuck?
The fact that my own manager thinks I should be so grateful and jumping through hoops for basically no money. I'm tired of having someone who doesn't believe in me is essentially what she's like. I'm tired of having you tell me that I need to deny myself every single one of my musical and emotional instincts to make music I don't want to make from no money that doesn't get put out anyway. Like, why would I be doing all this for nothing? And it's been 10, 12 years of fucking nothing.
Years of nothing. So the one, I will say, really good idea her manager has is that enough time has passed that she can re-record her music because Barry and Blackground have her first 2 albums just tied up and they're not putting them on streaming. So she, a la Taylor Swift, before Taylor Swift even knew about this, re-records her first 2 albums and drops them with 2 new singles.
One good thing coming her way is this guy, PJ Morton, who had been part of Maroon 5, was now a bona fide solo star who'd built up his own musical empire in New Orleans. And for some reason reaches out to her and he's like, hey, I'd love to work with you. Would you listen to this song? And for some reason she doesn't for a while. And then she sees him live and is like, oh my God, he's amazing. I have to listen to this song. And she's like, I love it. So she goes out and records with him. And that song ends up getting nominated for a Grammy.
Which is amazing.
And she had always promised herself from the time she was little that she would never go to the Grammys unless she was nominated. So she finally got to go to the Grammys 13 years later. And for some reason, because she didn't have a good seat, she like leaves.
Yeah, because her manager is like, if you don't have a really good seat, there's no reason to be there.
Her manager always says perception is everything. So she had it drilled in her head that it's worse to be at the Grammys in a bad seat than to not be at the Grammys at all, even when you're nominated. And she's like, well, they don't even televise the R&B singles. So she does the red carpet, then she goes home. On her way home, on FaceTime, he calls her and goes, we won the Grammy. And she's like, why didn't I fucking go?
Yeah.
Why am I not there celebrating with them?
I hope she can be there for her next Grammy.
And this is the second woman we've heard doing this. If you are a woman, let me tell you this.
Celebrate your shit, bitch.
If you are nominated for an award, go. Unless you have like good political reasons not to. Unless you're like thoughtfully abstaining.
Yeah.
But don't go just because someone told you it's not cool to go to an award show. Of course it is. Meanwhile, my ex hadn't spoken to me for damn near 2 years. He'd cut me all off. And I understood why, but she keeps sending him like long apologies and demos. She's just like writing to the void.
She also stays abstinent for about a year, which for her was quite a lot. And she was like, I knew that I was acting like a fucking idiot. Like she says, I was sick of my shit. I felt like I was a bad person who repeatedly engaged in flat out toxic behavior.
And this is when her therapist is like, yeah, you definitely are a love and sex addict. And now it's like bled mostly into sex. And of course, after 2 years, she sees her ex at a party and apologizes. He expressed that he had healed and moved on. He didn't hate me, but instead would always love me. And he wanted me to forgive myself and be able to let go. I was awestruck by his maturity and truly happy for him. So she's still like writing music and working on shit. She's very excited because I think she's like excited to see what she can do now. She's as close as she's ever been to writing her own music.
Her and her manager end up having this insane fight in the parking lot at Warner Music. And then her friend is like, why are you sobbing every time you interact with your manager? And finally, she decides to break up with her. She does this by writing a letter and then bringing it to her to like have her read it in front of her. Cause she's like, I know if I just say it out loud, I'll walk it back.
So it's 2020. Do you guys remember that year?
There was a pandemic.
She is feeling all these seismic shifts in her relationship. She's obviously broke up with her manager. She's single for the first time. She's just won this Grammy. She's feeling good about herself. She thinks she's in the right direction with her music. And her mom is starting to get sober and like doing a lot better. She had maintained her sobriety for several years and was deep in the thick of her own healing journey.
So her mom ends up moving in with her to her condo in LA.
So her mom moves in and then they start trying to roll out her new album. They have a single called Man. We had a solid 2 album plan. She has a new manager named Katie by her side as co-pilot, and it felt entirely full circle to finally put something out with Erin after all these years. On March 19th, 2020, we released Man, the exact same day the government issued a mandated statewide stay-at-home order.
A mandated.
We were officially in the thick of a global pandemic. Life as everyone knew it changed instantly, and all progress came to a screech. So she's just like, well, fuck, at least my mom's here. They're like going on walks, they're eating vegan. She's promoting as much as she can from the comforts of her home. She does like Jimmy Kimmel from her house. They actually at Interscope say like, look to JoJo for an example of how you can come up with out of the box thinking for how to promote your music. She does it live every day at noon.
I feel like she was extremely well versed in how to maintain some sort of relevance on social media, even when you can't put out music and you can't tour and you can't do anything, because she'd already done it for 10 years.
The album ends up debuting at number 1 on the Billboard R&B chart.
Then it's the summer of 2020.
And she is very involved in like protests and conversations about Black Lives Matters. And she meets a guy.
She meets a protest boyfriend.
He seems too good to be true, so she keeps him at arm's length. And is like, I'm still in love with my ex. And he goes, well, let me make you dinner and take out our moms. And she goes, that's so nice of you, but I'm still in love with my ex. And everybody's like, this is the man you've been looking for. He's so cute. He treats you so well. He's so intentional. He's a godly man. He wants a wife and a child.
He is wooing her.
She can't even believe it. He's sending her balloons and celebrating her in thoughtful little ways.
And so she's like, yeah, you know what? We'll be there. And then she also does The Masked Singer, which initially she'd been like, why would I do this has-been-ass show? But it's also the pandemic, so there's not a lot of opportunities for work. And also her and her boyfriend love watching The Masked Singer. So she's like, yeah, I'll be a masked singer.
Just go out there and sing, Joanna, like the old days. Stop taking yourself so seriously. You've been told everything is the end of the world. Nothing other than the end of the world is the end of the world. Which is true. I'm like, I don't know. At least you're doing The Masked Singer. That's better than whatever the fuck you were doing before, which was not doing anything.
That's so true. So then she is asked to record a song that she just isn't that interested in.
And basically, Erin cuts a deal with her and says, if you do this song, I'll let you do your own EP and we'll like give you all of our resources. So like do this thing for me and I'll do this thing for you. So she's like, okay, totally. Her boyfriend asked me why I would ever record something I didn't fully believe in, which is the same question everyone who loved me and didn't make money off me always eventually asked. I didn't have a good enough answer. So that song ends up bombing. But at least she's like, hey, well, now I can make my dream EP. Guess what fucking happens?
Of course, they're like, well, we don't really have the resources for that. And so she's like, oh, okay, I'm never fucking doing this again.
So she's like, whatever, we won't put it out. And then she goes, no, why wouldn't I just like put it out anyway? I had grown up thinking adults always had the answers. And guess what? Now I was the adult and I still didn't have a fucking clue, and neither did anyone around me, it seemed. Why not at least do something I felt good about and then follow my own sword if it came to it?
Yes.
Exactly.
So she and this guy get engaged.
She puts out the EP, Trying Not to Think About It, which is about anxiety. I don't know how good it goes, but she's proud of it finally.
And then she and her fiance, she and the guy get engaged. She moves in with him.
Even though he has like a tiny little house and she has a beautiful condo. But she's like, we were in our God bag at the time. So I let him be
the man of the house.
So we had to move into his shittier house. They're planning a big wedding. And she's like, this was so not me. I didn't really want a big wedding, but it was important to him. I'd rather like put down money for a bigger house.
And then she walks away again from her record label because she's just like, oh, I just need someone to spend some time with me. I need one dedicated A&R guy instead of bouncing around between 3. I just need one person who believes in me.
And Erin goes, yeah, we can't give that to you. Sorry.
And so she's like, okay, bye.
It turns out also at this time, her god husband who made her live in a small house was cheating on her. And she's just like, okay, I'm done with this. She calls all his friends, tells them. Luckily, what happens next? She loved Broadway. And so she calls her manager and says, see if there's anything for me in Broadway. And she books Moulin Rouge. So she moves to New York City knowing that this is it. She's going to be single in New York City and like just find this new part of herself.
She does 4 months as the star of Moulin Rouge and loves every second of it.
She's like, the camaraderie, the being a part of a show that was bigger than just me. Like one night she gets really sick and they're like, it's fine. We'll just bring in your understudy like mid-show. And she was like, it was such a relief to see that I was not the whole production. And I loved that. She loved that it was so scheduled. She loved that it was so regimented. She loved being in New York away from all her toxic LA relationships. She's like, it was so good for me. It fixed me. And after 3 months, when they asked if I wanted to extend my contract, I said no. And I was like, okay, JoJo, this is when we're like 4 pages out from the end. And I'm like, so we didn't learn anything.
No, she did learn something because she had been feeling so disillusioned with the music industry. And it was so invigorating to do Moulin Rouge that she was excited to make music again. And she felt confident in herself and sure of herself. And so she felt like that was a good time to get back into the studio when she had a burst of confidence and energy.
I think she should have done 3 more months.
Well,
3 more months of like a steady, consistent gig so that she just...
Stop telling her that she doesn't know what's right for her.
Okay. You think it's all good now?
I think she made a confident decision, and that's the decision that was made.
Okay, well, that's not what she says off mic. That is not what she said when she walked in the studio.
I think, listen, JoJo spent 20 years with people saying you don't know what's fucking best for yourself. Not me. Anyway, she decides to go to AA and she starts making music again. And her friend who she goes to AA with is like, are you sure you need it? You don't really seem like you're at rock bottom. Can I say, someone who seeks sobriety, don't ever be like, are you sure? You seem fine. No one has ever been fine when they're like, I really should probably get sober.
Anyway, Ashley, how many wormtinis would you like to have with JoJo?
Stay sober, Joj.
Okay, how many like glasses of seltzer?
I would be interested in a conversation with her.
Me too.
Maybe like 3?
I think 2.
Okay.
And how fertile would you say the soil is?
I would say that the tip of the cornfield was nutrient dense. And then as we got further towards the other edge, it was a bit weaker.
I'm going to give it like a 3.99999 repeated.
Yeah, I guess I really feel that this was a strong section 1.
Me too. I think she needs a little bit more distance. I mean, she started writing this book in an engagement. This book was supposed to end with a wedding because she wrote it for 18 months and they broke up like 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you call off an engagement during your memoir writing process, you have not had enough time to like accurately reflect on the last few years.
I think she's launching now into a whole new chapter of her career.
I'm very excited. I think this book was very necessary to like wipe the decks, get her name back in the general zeitgeist with the understanding that she wasn't some one-hit wonder has-been. She's somebody who's like bucked and stymied by a horrible industry, which to this day, how could there not be a better way to put music out?
There has to be. And I do think overall, this book was a smart decision because I think a lot of people know about her early career and then have said, well, what the fuck happened? I think people know that she was a star. And then I think people know that she was in some weird label hell, but no one really understands what happened.
I guess I didn't know she was in a label hell.
I knew that she was being stymied in some way.
Who was not being stymied?
Our beautiful, flourishing 5-star reviewers.
And if you want more of this, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Celebrity Memoir Book Club. We are getting into the music industry, more tidbits from the JoJo episode that we did not get into in this episode, like fun little Taylor Swift backstories and all the gossip about who she talks shit about by name. And whatever's going on that week, we always love to gab.
We do love to gab.